Hi, this is Giuseppe Argenziano. This is the second video concerning congenital nevi, which are, in my estimation, much more interesting than expected. In the previous video, we spoke about medium and large congenital nevi that are hamartomas present at birth, but many small congenital nevi can appear later, within the first decade of life. Most congenital nevi of any size will persist throughout lifetime, and most of the small congenital nevi will become in the classical intradermal nevi we see in elderly people. However, especially some congenital nevi located on special areas, including nails and ductal sites, might disappear due to spontaneous evolution. And last, but not least, and we will speak about this in this video, if there is any precursor lesion of melanoma, then congenital melanocytic nevus is entitled to be the most important one. What about melanoma risk? Melanoma risk in congenital nevi is definitely clear-cut. There are few good papers out there, especially this one. Over 6,500 nevi were studied over a very long period of follow-up, and overall, the risk of development of melanoma is less than 1%. It's 0.7%. Okay, so about 1% of congenital nevi will develop into melanoma. And of course, also in this paper, like or in many others, the evidence is that the larger the nevus, the higher the chance of melanoma developing into it. Okay. But what is the bias of this study and of many other studies concerning melanoma risk in congenital nevi? Is that most of them were dealing with intermediate size and intermediate and large size congenital nevi, but very few papers were studying the risk, the melanoma risk of small congenital nevi. So actually we don't know what's going on with small congenital nevi. And you know what is our experience? Our experience is that, of course, it's true that the risk increases by the increasing size of the nevus, but in reality, in the real clinical practice, the majority of melanomas arise in small congenital nevi. Why? Because they are much more frequent than the larger ones, okay? In our experience, in our series, the great majority of our melanomas arising in a congenital nevus were belonging to small congenital nevi, 78%. While only 20%, about 20% of melanomas in our collection developed into intermediate and large congenital nevi. Okay, and this is basically due to the different prevalence of these three types of nevi. What about large nevi? Large nevi have a risk of about 10%. Of developing melanoma, so 1 out of 10. But how many large nevi we see in our practice? Maybe once per year. So we take 10 years to see one melanoma developing into a large size congenital nevus. What about medium? They are more frequent, but still quite rare. But how many small congenital nevi we see? Thousands and thousands, also because of what I told you before. The great majority of small congenital nevi develop in the first decade of life, and they become intradermal nevi, and most of us, basically all of us, have some intradermal nevi, therefore some small congenital nevi. So we have millions of congenital nevi, therefore it's we have a higher chance to see melanoma developing into a small congenital nevus compared to a large congenital nevus. Here an example of a small congenital nevus in an 11-year-old boy, and you can see here a blue-white veil superficial melanoma. And here you see a girl, 14-year-old, lesion on the back. We are still in the, intermediate size congenital nevus, and here again blue-white veil superficial melanoma developing into a small to intermediate size congenital nevus. And here again a small size congenital nevus in an 18-year-old girl, and again blue-white veil, which is the classical sign of melanoma arising in a pre-existing congenital nevus. So what about the management? We have no evidence that there is one management which is better than the other one. So we only have to use our common sense, our logical way of thinking. Okay, so for example, this is a 14-year-old lady with an intermediate sized congenital nevus and a melanoma developed recently into it, and this is a 2 millimeter thick melanoma. Okay, so it's a shame, that we didn't remove this nevus before the development of this melanoma. So the way we are doing in our practice is more or less this one. Small congenital neva, they are millions, so we cannot remove them. So we advise the patient to come back if there is a change of a small congenital nevus. What about large congenital nevi? We cannot remove a large congenital nevus, so we have to monitor forever. But what about intermediate size? Medium size congenital nevi could be excised. They are not so frequent, but the risk is not so small. So why not to prevent a few melanomas? And with this, I thank you for your attention. So please be careful about congenital neva, and goodbye from Napoli.